And as such, because they were able to get him to love the topic of chemistry, he ends up doing something that is fun for him. So to talk to a person like that, can you imagine how difficult your life will be having to work in an area of chemistry? He doesn't understand the question because he's playing while other people are working. And that's my attitude about speaking and pitching. And what we'll talk about today is useful when you do a pitch. But I'll tell you what, I'll share some ideas with you that'll be useful for you in a private relationship one-on-one. So much is common in these areas. And we as adults think just because I learned to speak at the age of 2, I know how to communicate. But just because you make noise doesn't mean you're communicating. And communicating can often be more about the person who's listening and less about me. I like to share stories. I feel sometimes I'm really fortunate because my life is full of meeting interesting people in interesting situations. To give you a little background, you can tell from my accent, I'm from the, well, let me ask, why should I answer the question? Seppo, if I mispronounce your name, please forgive me. Where do you think I'm from?
I'd say somewhere from the States.
That's right. Any idea what part of the States? I'm not even asking you to be specific.
East Coast.
East Coast. No, I was born in New Jersey.
Okay.
But I left there when I was still in rubber pants. And I grew up in the state of Colorado. I don't know if have you been to Colorado?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Do not leave this planet
without visiting
Colorado or Texas. I used to live in Dallas, Texas, and I became intimately familiar with what it means to think in a different dimension. And not much after I arrived to Dallas, somebody shared with me a not so well-known bit of information that God was born in Texas. So it tended to put everything in its place. Right? So I've been fortunate because of mentors and people that I've had an opportunity to work with, both in the US, as well as I'm currently living in Budapest, Hungary. I've had the opportunity to work with children. My youngest student was 9, and I prepared her to give a speech in front of 180 people on stage inside a sit-down dinner. And she owned the stage. So there was no, I don't care how old you are, she owned it, she walked it, there was no lectern, there was nothing other than her on the stage. And since there were 180 people, 360 eyeballs that were pointed at her. So she was my youngest student. My oldest student was a gentleman in the Hungarian jail system. He was 75 years old and he was behind bars for committing murder. And I took many of my prior students and I took them into jail. And the reason I wanted them inside jail, not because they deserved to be there, maybe they did and I didn't know that, but inside jail you have 2 tools that you can use to earn the respect of the inmate. Any idea what those tools are? Valentina, want to take a guess what those 2 tools you have to earn their respect?
Oh, it's not an easy question. Let me think about it for 1 second. Maybe your past and I don't know.
Okay, unfair question. I can tell, so I use that question to test if anybody's been to jail, and you passed the test. So what you're able to do is, in a real situation, use your ability to speak and how you hold your body to earn the respect. If you earn the respect, they'll leave you alone. If you don't earn their respect, all bets are off and who knows what will happen. And I'm a firm believer in using real life situations instead of having people close their eyes and say, imagine you're in a room with 10 people who are in jail because they committed murder. It's more powerful if you're there. And the stakes are higher. And somehow people tend to operate better and perform better when there are stakes. And for you, given a pitch, there are stakes. You're trying to get a person, hopefully with deep pockets, to reach into their pocket and pull some money out. There's something at stake. And if you are working, you hone these two skills, you can use that anywhere. You can use that when you're trying to get your way at the airport. You can do that at home with your spouse if you're in a relationship. You can do that at the hotel. And so we'll talk about that today. So my youngest student was 9. My oldest was 75. He was in jail for murder. And we taught the inmates to become better speakers. The most famous person that I had an opportunity to spend on stage, so just the two of us on stage, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the smartest person, I think smartest person, was a gentleman by the name of Edgar Mitchell. Now, before anybody goes to Google to look it up, anybody want to take a guess on who Edgar Mitchell was? Laura?
Sorry, no idea.
No idea. Okay. And I'm happy you answered that because he's not a well-known person. Anybody want to take a guess on how many people have walked on the moon? Physically walked on the moon. How many?
Who?
Not 2, more than 2.
6.
More?
15.
Less. So twice
10.
6. Twice 6 is 12.
Oh.
So since the Earth has been around, and I'll let you argue whether that's 3.5 billion, 4.5 billion, 12 billion years, doesn't matter. Regardless of where your starting point is, there have only been 12 people who have walked on the moon, and Edgar Mitchell was number 6. And they asked me to translate for him. I hate translating, don't like it, never liked it. But when they said he's walked on the moon, I said, oh, what the hell? And so I sat next to him on stage in front of 5,000 people. And as he spoke, I translated. And it was the worst translation I ever did because I was so under his influence as he starts talking about personal stories. He says, we're coming back from the moon. And I'm thinking, oh my, I mean, I'm all goosebumps. How many people can say that? We've had 110 billion people born since the beginning of time, and 12 out of 110 billion have walked on the moon. And so he says, as we're coming back from the moon, and I look out one window and I see the moon, I look out another window, I see Earth, and I look out a third window and I see the heavens. And I'm thinking, you want me to translate that? I mean, my heart was racing and I felt the power of what he had experienced. And so finding the right story as we go forward will be impactful because it's like when you're dressing up your child, if you have a child, and let's say it's the child's first day of school. Anybody who's got a child roughly about that age that is first day of school? Seppo, you do? So what do you do with the child on the first day of school?
Well, I guess I encourage him or her and you know, try to ease up any overexcitement or anxiety regarding
Okay.
starting something completely new.
Okay, what about the way they look? Do you do anything? Do you encourage that they dress nicely?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
So when I went first day to school, and even my kids, when it was the first day of school, their hair was combed, the shirt was ironed, they looked fantastic. And part of the reason we do that is I, as a parent, am using my child to show every other parent at the school what a great person I am. Thumbs up. If I'm honest, that's what I'm doing. But I'm also doing it because I want to make it obvious that I'm willing to put the time and effort in to put my best child forward. And as we prepare our pitches, as we prepare a speech, I want you to think of the analogy of how you would send your child to school on the first day. You'll put that extra effort in because you realize the importance of that impact. And that extra effort is what will separate you from everybody else pitching, unless they are willing to put the extra effort in. Let me give you an example, a real life example. When we're done with this, I'm meeting with a gentleman who used to be the deputy CEO for one of the largest banks here in Budapest called Unicredit Bank, Italian bank. And every year their bank hosted an event where on one Saturday in March, they invited the 1,500 employees together in one location, and all the C-level managers had to present to the 1,500 people. Now, typical company on the one end of that spectrum is the CEO who's smart and educated. And on the other end of that spectrum is the person who buys toilet paper for the bank branches in the countryside. You've got a massive difference in reference points, education, and their ability to understand something that might be technical or modern. So he came to me, Alex, and he says, what in the hell do I do? And my problem is that I'm the deputy CEO responsible for IT. What do I tell 1,500 people about IT in the bank? And we have an expression in the US called speeds and feeds when I share lots of data, technical data with people to impress them. But most people are, number one, turned off by technical data. And number two, they don't understand it. So sharing information with people that they don't like or don't understand is a good way to get them to turn their attention button off. And the best way that I know of, and most other people know of, is to be able to share a story. Now we'll go into the details. I'll share the story with you, and then we'll go into the details as we go through. I have a few slides that I'll share with you, but a few in my book is a few. 8. That's not a lot. And we're going to learn all an expression today that is an expression they use in Texas. So today your life will change just a little bit because you'll be richer with a statement that they use in Texas. So in Texas, we would say not only no, but hell no, if we wanted to add emphasis. Or the other way, not only yes, Bud, hell yes. So we'll be using that new sentence that we learned today to show our agreement. So Alex envisions being out on stage, and the first thing that he needs to be able to do is what? What do you think the most important thing to be able to do when you're on stage?
Grab the attention first.
You got grab the attention. How much time do you have to grab somebody's attention?
The first seconds.
Yeah, 8. So if you're not in their space, if you will, if you're not in their head within 8 seconds, it's not impossible, but it becomes an uphill battle. And the biggest reason it becomes an uphill battle is most of us all carry with us a digital drug, and it looks like this. And if you're boring, guess what? I have something that's not. Have you ever seen a child, an adult, take their smartphone and throw it on the ground and say, this is so boring? It doesn't happen because many of the applications realize that the way to keep you engaged is to make the information interesting. So you may not like the fact that there are people who have smartphones, but that is our reality. And so I need to ensure that I am immediately in that 8-second space so they pay attention to me. There are a couple ways to do that. We'll talk about them after the story. So Alex gets up on stage and he's got 1,500 people looking at him, and he puts up a picture of the moon. Would that grab your attention if you're at a banking seminar and somebody puts up a picture of the moon? What do you think? Lori, you're shaking your head? Absolutely. And then he asks a question. Who was the first person to walk on the moon? Anybody, go ahead and answer that question.
Armstrong.
Armstrong, exactly. A lot of people knew Neil Armstrong. Their hands were in the air and they were yelling it out. Little pause, second question. Who was the second person who walked on the moon?
I knew it, but I forgot.
Okay.
Buzz Aldrin.
Buzz Aldrin, exactly. And then another pause, and then he said, who was the third astronaut in the command module who wasn't allowed to step out on the moon, without whom there is no landing on the moon, without whom the 2 other astronauts are not able to write their name in the history books, who was key for the success of the mission? And the room went silent. It was like being at a funeral. Nobody knew. First of all, there was a third person? And then Alex puts up the next slide and says in complete silence, his name was Michael Collins, and we are the Collins department in the bank. Is there any doubt in your mind that anybody in that 1,500 didn't understand what IT is about? Nobody, if I want to share details about this many megabytes and this kind of broadband and this kind of connector, I need to do that in an email. If I want to bring the people alive, and bringing people alive is what's needed for them to invest, to make an emotional decision that they will trust you. The first thing you need to achieve is they need to understand what you and your organization is about. And even though Alex is not an astronaut, even though UniCredit Bank doesn't fund NASA programs, the story is well known enough to carry the message on its back that everybody needs to understand. I'm going to assume that some of you have been on a first date. Anybody want to volunteer and answer a question for me about being on a first date? It's not going to be bad. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to call your therapist afterward.
I don't have problem about it.
Okay, so Valentina, you've been on a first date. Assume that that person, this is, let's say you've never met that person before. What is your goal? Let's say that weren't recently released from jail. They're not crazy. So what is your goal during the first date? What do you want to achieve?
Make a good impression and understand if we are compatible.
Okay, so what? What's the goal?
Remove his structure to understand the real him.
Okay, so let's say you're having this date, you're talking, you're trying to find out this information, and what is your goal? Let's say the information is good. Your goal is then to do what?
To show my real me in the best way.
Okay, and then if these two work together, then what's the goal?
To have another date.
There you go. So the goal of a first date is to get a second date. And if you and I, let's say we were on a blind date and we never knew each other, and we're talking, and I'd say, guess what? 3 weeks ago, I had back surgery and I've got a 15-centimeter cut on my back. We're 15 minutes into the date. How would you feel about that?
Can you please repeat, because I had some noise from the background?
So we're on the date, 15 minutes into the date, and I'm telling you, I've got a cut on my back that's 15 centimeters long because I had back surgery.
But I would be like I would like to ask you if you are fine and if it's something.
Wouldn't you consider that to be, in the US, we have this expression called TMI. Do you know what that means, TMI? Anybody?
No.
Justina, what does it mean?
Too much information.
Too much information.
Yeah, okay.
So that's starting to get into the very private zone. And that would be information that you would share later on. So if you're thinking about a pitch and trying to get somebody to invest, details of the exact amount and how you want it sequenced and what your bank account number is, way too early. We're not there yet. We need to get to the second date. And the way I get to the second date is I make you want me. I present myself, my idea, my company in the best way for you to say, I would like to learn more. And to get that process started, now I'm going to share the screen and show you some slides. The way to get that started is, as a first step, is when you get up to speak, you do exactly the opposite of what they expect you to do. So often you'll see when, especially if there's a stage, people will have one leg on the stage and they'll start to talk. And you should never start to talk first with your back facing the people you're trying to get money from. And number two, you need to choreograph how this happens. And you don't give away everything. You drip the information to them so they become more and more interested. Give you an example of how this happens. A speaker that I follow from the US, his name is John Maxwell. Maybe you've read from him. He was originally a pastor of a church in San Diego and Ohio. And then he pivoted to becoming a teacher of leadership skills in business. And he does a very good job of keeping the two topics separate. People know that he's a pastor and they ask him, John, we need you to talk to these 1,000 people, but keep the spiritual and the God stuff for some other time. And he's okay with that. And so he'll be on stage and he'll say, today, and I'm here to tell you that there are 4 secrets to success. And during this seminar, the next 3 hours that we'll spend together, we're going to talk about 3 of them. You're sitting there in the audience and you hear there are 4 secrets to success, and we're going to talk about 3 of them. What do you feel?
Disappointed.
Disappointed, or what's the other side of being disappointed? You become very curious, right?
Yeah.
What in the world could that feel? And so when we don't share everything, we are able to increase somebody's curiosity. So many investors have seen hundreds of pitches, and some of them have been excellent, but many of them have not. And so they're used to, oh, well, they're going to start talking before they have my attention. And you get on stage, you plant your feet on the ground, and you want your feet as far apart from each other as your shoulders are. And you pull your shoulders back. And you do exactly what this lady on the slide is doing. And that is silence. Silence is the most underused, yet the healthiest tool to influence the other side. So you as a speaker need to give signals to the audience on how they need to emotionally interact with you. If you went to a movie to watch you went to the theater to watch a movie and it was just boring, there was no emotional up and down, and you were bored after 10 minutes, would you sit through the entire movie? Some of us would if we had a strong grandmother figure in our childhood who taught us that you have to be there and it would be rude to get up. you might feel compelled to stay in your seat. But then you would put your hands together and say, thank goodness that I have a smartphone, because now I have something to do. In the US, there is a movie theater called AMC, and they have an application that you can download to your phone. And the application allows you to look at the movie that you're watching, and it will tell you what are the boring parts of the movie 6 minutes into it, 18 minutes into it, where you can afford to stand up and go to the restroom and come back and not miss any of the action. So that already goes opposite of what my grandmother would have taught me, that, yeah, you can get up and don't worry about missing the important part of the film. But you need to be the choreographer. You are Steven Spielberg when you get on stage and you're giving your pitch. So the first thing you do is you create what? If I put in a long pause, I start with silence. What does the audience begin to feel as the silence grows in length?
Tension.
Tension. So if you're taking notes, write this down. If you're not taking notes, write this down. Without tension, there is no attention. So as I use a longer pause, I know why I'm doing it, because I want to draw in my audience. This works in a relationship as well. If you're in control and you're the speaker or you're the one who initiates it, you can get the use of a pause to create tension. 3 years ago, I rented a room because I was holding a small seminar, and I had rented the room from 6 o'clock in the evening. I arrived early because I had a meeting that was canceled, and I was there at 4. And I went to the porter to ask for the key to the conference room. And he looked at me and says, "Are you the one who's rented the room from 6 o'clock in the evening?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." He looked at his watch, it was 4. He said, "Well, then you'll need to come back in 2 hours to get the key." Anybody want to take a guess how I felt when he told me that? Was I happy? What do you think? Laura, was I happy?
Probably no. Yes,
No.
please.
No.
Yeah.
I was not only no, but hell no. I wanted the key. And here is this underpaid porter who's making my life difficult. Now, even though he may be less educated than me, he has power over me because he has the key and I don't. So I looked at him, knowing what I'm telling you now, and I said, "So what you're telling me is I need to come back at 6. And I looked at him and I said, "I'm convinced that you can come up with a better solution than that." And then I stopped. And I stood from him a meter away, and I gave him silence. And as the silence started to grow in length, the tension started to build. And as the tension began to build, whoever makes the next move loses. Anybody want to guess how he got rid of the tension?
Giving you the key.
There you go. So he reached up to the board, grabbed the key, and gave it to me. Think about what I just gave you. I gave you a tool that doesn't require you to scream, doesn't require you to comment about his family tree, his mother, his grandmother, and allows you to get what you wanted. Because regardless of how frustrated you are, your goal is to get the key. That's the only goal you have, is to get the key. And using a powerful pause is a wonderful way first to grab their attention and then to create tension. Try it next time. I use it often when I don't get my way. And I'm forever amazed. And now don't misunderstand, don't hear something I'm not saying. That person will not become your friend. But getting the key is a completely different task than becoming my friend. I don't need the porter as my friend. I mean, if we become friends later on, okay, but that's not my goal, right? So anytime you start off, resist the urge to start talking before you've positioned yourself and pulled your shoulders back. And the reason you do that is because this position, without saying anything, does what is called the meta communicate. It's how you communicate with your whole body without using words. And it's why your body is more powerful than your words often, because if I go on a date with you, Laura, and we're sitting at over a coffee, and I'm telling you, Laura, I love you. I've never been happier in my life. And yet I'm looking out the window and not at you. You have to ask yourself, which has a greater impact on my life? I'd love to believe what you're saying, but what your body is doing sends a louder message. And so use your body. I mean, unless you're going to give the pitch presentation in a dark cave where there are no lights, then everything I just said doesn't matter. But please somehow find a way to get video of that pitch, because I will talk about you going forward, that you're the first person who's given a pitch in a dark cave.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Yes.
We may not give a pitch in a dark cave, but we may give a pitch in a web version.
Right.
So how may we deal with that?
The same thing, with the exception of standing. Now, you may be in a studio where you're standing, but when you get started, you want to make sure that you go into your pitch following this sequence so the first is a pause, not immediately. So if I were pitching to you today, as soon as Justina gave me the floor, I would allow a few minutes or a few seconds of pause before I got involved, before I began to speak. And what you never do is you never start with, "Hi, my name is," because when you see this picture here on the slide, what is that telling you about what's happening in that moment? What is the guy in the red shorts, what's he experiencing? Pain. But what has happened for him to experience the pain?
He is losing.
He's
Gut
losing,
punch.
but just for, let's look at just this frame. The guy
Gut
in the
punch.
black or gray, he has done what with his left fist? He has made what?
Gut punch.
Gut punch or impact, right? So without the impact, you don't get this emotional reaction. If he were just to pet the guy a little bit or rub his shoulder, it wouldn't create this. So when you get started, you need to make a powerful impact. And you do that by telling you who I am is not a powerful impact. It's grabbing your attention. So I'm choreographing it. I start off with silence. I create the tension. I draw you in. And I had a student once. He was from Transylvania. Most of you will understand that. And he was supposed to give a short 1-minute speech with a powerful and impactful opening. So he got up and he stood on his 2 feet, weight equally distributed, shoulders back. And he starts off by saying, I love Ceausescu. Pause. If somebody were to stand in front of you and open a speech like that, would you have some kind of an opinion of that person immediately? You would. Good. And what would you, and I'm not going to tell him that you thought this of him, but anybody, what would your opinion be?
Not good.
Not good, negative. Okay, so hold that thought for a moment. When I lived in Dallas, Texas, I had the wonderful fortune of doing a 2-week seminar that was run by Dr. Phil. Does that name ring a bell for anybody? He has become the #1 talk show host in the US. After Oprah retired, he took over her space. His base salary from the TV station, base salary, is $90 million a year, base, show up pay. Now, I realize some of you are thinking, that's not much. I wouldn't go to work for that. But he thinks it's a lot of money. And somebody asked him, why do you make so much money? And he said, because I'm a professional. When it comes to psychology, behavior, motivation, I will share my professional opinion. Oh, that you may not agree with my opinion doesn't even register on my radar screen. And the easy way to say it in English is own your opinion. By Dr. Phil owning his opinion, that often many of the people in TV land, when they hear his opinion, a professional opinion, do they agree with him? Not only no, but hell no. And that moment creates tension. The tension glues the listener to the TV screen. With so many viewers, the advertisers push lots of advertising to Dr. Phil's show. So much so that they can afford to pay him $90 million a year. It's a simple formula. In the case of this gentleman, he owned his opinion. He wasn't questioning what is somebody in the audience going to think when I say that? He owned his opinion and he opened with it. And when you start with a powerful opening, you grab their attention and then you follow up at the end by connecting the beginning with the end. Okay, so he got up and he said, I love Ceausescu. And he gave his speech. And then he ended it by saying, and that's why I can stand here today and tell you that I love Ceausescu. So if you've got a speech material, a pitch that has the beginning and the end connected, then you, the audience, walk away with the full product. And when I connect them, remember I said, you need to be Steve Spielberg. You're choreographing how the audience should react to you. When you feel, as the audience member, that everything is connected, I got it all, then me as the speaker, how do I end my pitch? Let me rephrase it. How do most people end their pitch? And people in Texas would say, is that the right way to do it? Not only no, but hell no. So what do people often say when they're done with their speech? Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's what the Texan would say, not only no, but hell no. And the reason people do that, because often the only person who realizes that the presentation or speech has come to an end is the speaker. And it is awkward to be alone in that room, being the only person who knows that. And so they force a reaction from the audience. What is the person forcing the audience to do? Thank you. Now what is supposed to happen? That's right, Seppo, applause. Instead, you're so much further than they are, because you've already learned that I've got this tool called silence. Remember the porter with the key? And that's why I can stand here and say, I love Ceausescu. The beginning is connected to the end. Now comes silence. And as the silence grows, the tension grows. How does the audience get rid of the tension? Seppo?
By starting discussion.
Right,
Saying
by
something.
clapping.
Yeah.
By clapping.
Yeah.
So the elegant way, and if you're going to do it, remember the little kid, first day of school, if you're going to do it, damn it, make it elegant. It's your job choreographing this, that the audience knows how to interact with you. Can you imagine going to a ballroom dancing class and being paired up with somebody who doesn't know how to give you signals on how to follow that person? What will your shoes look like at the end of that lesson? Make sure you don't go in white shoes, because they will be scuffed and dirty, right? So it's my responsibility. So I grab the person's attention. How do you do that? Make it short. For example, I love Ceausescu's 3 words. You can start with a number. 2021. Pause. 2021. My business failed. Pause. Think about this. I'm going to introduce something else. My business failed. You're thinking bankruptcy. 2021, my business failed. Pause. to go down the same path as my competitors. Today, we're healthy with increasing revenues. So as I share information and I start to break up sentences, look for breaks that allow my audience to immediately assume they know what's coming and to go off in that direction. In English, we call that jumping to conclusions. And you're now playing with them. Let them in that pause jump to a conclusion. And then when you start to speak again, bring them back. Sarah is 4 years old. And Sarah's mom is in the living room and says, Sarah, please bring me an apple from the kitchen. There should be 2 of them on the counter. Bring me an apple. Sarah, being the well-behaved 4-year-old, grabs one apple with her right hand and grabs the other apple with her left hand. And as she starts to walk towards the living room, she stops and takes a bite out of the apple in her right hand. She chews it, swallows it, starts to walk once again toward the living room. 3/4 of the way to the living room, she stops and takes a bite out of the left apple. Before I continue this, what are you thinking? Here's a kid, 4 years old, asked to deliver an apple to the mom, and she has now taken a bite out of both apples. Are you making a judgment call? My kids would never do that. Oh no, I've raised my kids to be different. So who would be thinking that? Nobody? Laura, would you have any kind of an opinion about this little girl? Wouldn't you find it strange that she's now bitten into both apples? Often people make a value judgment. So in the pause, you let them make this value judgment, similar to what I was saying. And then Sarah arrives in the living room next to her mom and hands her mother the left apple and says, take this one, Mom. This one is sweeter. And it's an excellent story that helps to share how we jump to conclusions. And it's okay if your audience, I know what's going to happen. And then you take them off into a different direction. Opa. The next, so I've hit him with a punch. Now I want to share a story. Often people will ask for help on putting together their pitch. I'll say, why are you doing this instead of being a pole dancer in a bar? And you would be amazed at how many startuppers there are that have a difficult time answering that question. There's got to be a good reason why you're doing this, something that shows your passion. Maybe someone had a challenge, a health challenge in your family. There was a young 15-year-old guy in high school on the East Coast in the US. And several years ago, his name is Jack Addick. And several years ago, his favorite uncle was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died in 4 weeks. And Jack loved his uncle. And it hurt him. And he started thinking, why in the world do we not have a quick test for pancreatic cancer? And he searched and there was none. And I know you're thinking 15, his job is to go to school. And instead he took his free time and he sat down in front of a browser and all the information was searchable. And here is a child, 15 years old, who had the reason why. He had his story. He had that light burning in his stomach, or that fire burning in his stomach, in his belly. And he put together a quick test to determine if somebody has pancreatic cancer. So what is your reason for doing this? When the reason, for example, I'm very passionate, hopefully it comes across, but I'm very passionate about speaking. I'm very passionate about making sure that my child on the first day of school is dressed appropriately. And the reason is because I was 17 in high school in Denver when I failed. I had to give a speech on stage in front of 800 students, and I failed. I didn't fail a little bit, massive failure. I couldn't open my mouth for 3 minutes. I stood there, I was frozen. Plan A was that I memorized my speech word for word. Bad idea. Plan B was that I folded my speech together and it was in my front pocket. There was no plan C. When your name is announced, and often we say fight or flight, but that's incomplete. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And I froze. We liken it to the deer on the road when it sees the car with the approaching headlights and it looks into the headlights and the poor deer freezes and is not able to get out of the way of the car. And so I had no plan B or plan C for what the hell do I do if I'm frozen? And the silence was so long that many of the students stood up and left the auditorium. I was the last speaker. They said, he's the last speaker. He's not going to speak. No reason to wait. We didn't have smartphones back then. We had smart feet. They just stood up and walked out of the auditorium. And so the pain associated with that was so deep and so profound that I had my why on why I want to become a better speaker, why I want to overcome this fear. And as I started down that journey and was able to do that, not alone, with the help of many people, I felt that I need to use this skill to give back to others who may have maybe a lower level of anxiety, but I have no problem talking about the why I would even dedicate time to do this. Because often it doesn't make sense for me to take my limited time and use it to train high school students. Other than I believe in building a country and a society from the bottom up. And if I'm able to give children, startuppers, business people, the ability to generate more self-confidence in their lives, will that end up translating into a better world? My belief it is, because my world has become significantly better from being able to do that. So you need to know the story behind. I can't make that up for you. But if you think about a story, then a story is easy to remember, easier to remember. And it reduces the pressure on you. It takes the burden off your shoulder that you need to memorize your text word for word. Here comes the follow-up question. Who wants to answer this? Who read the childhood story, The Three Little Pigs? Anybody? Guidita, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I read it.
What kind of material did they build the first house out of?
I can't remember.
What did they build the second house out of? Do you remember the third one?
Yeah. The third one was one that resists.
Right. So anybody want to help her? What was the first one built out of?
Hay. It
Hay.
was out of hay.
Second one?
Wood branches.
Wood. Hay, wood. Third one?
Cement.
Cement, brick, stone.
Yeah, bricks. Yeah.
Okay. So when's the last time, out of curiosity, Justina, when's the last time you read that story?
Yesterday evening.
Are you serious?
I have a 2-year-old, so yes.
Oh, that's not fair.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anybody else? But that is one of those stories that most people are able to recall 15, 20, 30 years later. And what's important in that story? Hay, wood, brick. Everything else in that story is filler. How they got from the first location to the second location. Was it a self-driving Tesla? Was it a new underground? Was it a flying drone? Doesn't matter. That story is about those three materials. And that story is also a wonderful way, if you use that story, for example, to show that it makes a difference what kind of materials you use. So if your message is that, for example, choose your material well, then you can bring in a story like that to illustrate it. If you want to share like Jack did, that people are suffering needlessly because of no quick test for pancreatic cancer, and then he shares his personal story, it achieves the same result. So what I want to do is give you permission to use both kinds of stories. It's okay to talk about personal stories. Often they fit very well. And you don't have to give away details that you don't want to. Too much detail is not needed. Remember what we said about the dating question? TMI. There's no reason to give away too much information because it doesn't make a difference. I would never tell you if the pigs went from the first location to the second location, if they were riding their bicycles. I would never tell you what the air pressure was in the front tire because it's too much information, number one, and number two, it adds absolutely nothing to the story, right? So I started off by creating tension by using a pause. Then I hit the person and I grabbed their attention. Oh, by the way, going back to my Transylvania friends example, you hear somebody get on stage and they say, I love Ceausescu. As we heard you come up with a negative impression of him, but are you more or less curious to hear why he would stand in front of you and say, I love Ceausescu. Anybody? More or less? Laura, what do you think?
Sure, more.
More.
Yeah.
So even though, remember Dr. Phil, don't agree with him, even though you think the guy's an idiot and his medicine is expired and there's clearly something wrong, you're still drawn to his story. So what did he do in the beginning? Owned his opinion. So he drew you in, and then he went on to say, and I'm just quoting what his story is about, I'm not passing judgment over it. He says, when I was 16 years old, my mom on a Saturday morning said, I want to tell you something that's important for you to know. Have a seat in the kitchen. I'll make you a warm cup of coffee or a warm tea, sorry. And while you're sipping the tea, I'll share the story with you. So I did what my mom told me. I sat down in the kitchen. My mom made a tea, pushed it in front of me. She said, I want you to know that the reason you're alive today is because Ceausescu outlawed abortions. If he wouldn't have done that, you wouldn't be here today. And that's why I can stand here today and tell you that I love Ceausescu. Hearing the second part of his speech, for anybody who had a negative impression of him in the beginning, what is your impression of him at the end? Seppo, what do you think? Did your opinion change? So did you think it was negative when he opened? And then after he shared his story, did it flip to a positive?
Yeah, that's likely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so if he risks owning his opinion, we immediately jump to the conclusion that he's an idiot. And just a little bit later, this speech was less than a minute and a half. And he shared this speech once 15 years ago. And I can't for the life of me forget it. He's not a professional speaker. He's not paid. He's not an quote unquote important person in society. He just put the right pieces in the right order and created impact. Right? So you have to have a story. He had a story. There must be a reason why you're doing what you're doing. One of the areas that men, and I'm going to go on record and you can call me politically incorrect, but one of the areas that men tend to have a challenge with is we don't do a good job of when you look at this little boy, what do you interpret when you see his face? What do you think? He is
He's
what?
happy.
He's happy.
Happy, surprised. Yeah.
He's surprised. He's excited. And all of these are emotions. And if you go back to the movie we talked about, and there are no emotions, it's just a boring storyline, you will ask for your money back. And so even if you're in a pitch, using emotions is absolutely appropriate. If you tell somebody in a presentation, for example, I was so mad, and you don't put the emotion behind it, then you'll end up having a similar effect as me telling Laura that I love her over coffee, staring out the window. Warren Buffett, most of you are familiar with him. This is his number one skill, the ability to speak in public. And he says, if you're smart and aren't able to transfer the information to the other side, it's exactly like when the guy winks at the girl in the dark. It has no effect. And just like we're not giving pitches and speeches in dark caves, we need to show the emotions. And it's difficult to put emotion in my voice if I don't have emotion on my face. Don't worry don't go overboard. You're not trying to get people scared or screaming or crying, but you have control over how much you put in. And you need to test yourself. So comedians will go to a small place in the countryside to test their jokes. You need to test your pitch. You need to practice it. You need to get feedback on it. And get feedback on, is that level of emotion appropriate or inappropriate? And if you're willing to do that, it's like putting spice on your presentation. It's like putting cologne. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but imagine it's like putting cologne on your 6-year-old son as you walk him to school. It's just that little added something that makes it easier to digest and remember. There's a really ugly word, and I don't use it often. It's called transmogrification. Don't write this one down, but transmogrification is easiest to describe by using an analogy of a ball. So I have a baseball in my hand and I throw it to you in the air. And as it travels through the air, it turns into a soccer ball. That process there's a word for it, it doesn't happen, but that process is called transmogrification. And often people, when they give their pitches or their presentations, they are hoping that transmogrification works, that I'll just throw out whatever I throw out. And as it travels through the air, it will change into an obvious and easy to understand message. It won't. You need to limit yourself to one message, not 50, not 5, 1. And that message, as John Maxwell, who I referred to earlier, will say, you need to put the message on the bottom shelf next to the cookies so everybody has access to it. If you go back to Alex's speech at Unicredit, he used a story to send one message. And that message was, IT is important in your job, in everything you do. And he said it in an elegant way, because if he stands on stage and says, you can't do anything without me, that's true. But when you hear that, you're offended. Oh, gee, Alex, I mean, go see your therapist again. That's just not the right way to talk to us. Instead, he sends one message, and you need to make sure that that message is 1. Now, 1's a really small number, but the nice thing about math is it's the only exact science we have. So 1 is 1. It's not almost 1. It's not a little bit more than 1. It's 1. And it's worth testing on people, because that's what people will take away. And if they don't understand it, they will not put the time and effort in to make it their job to figure out what you're talking about. So my job as the speaker is to simplify it, that people understand what I'm trying to achieve with my startup. And so far, the tools we've used by using or starting with the pause, starting with something powerful, bringing in the story, limiting myself to one message. These are all the little tools we have to take the listener on this wonderful ride of being involved in my startup, in my story. Most of you, I'm assuming, grew up somewhere around this comic strip. We called it Popeye. I'm not sure that he has different names in different countries. And anybody want to hazard a guess? Seppo, what happened in Popeye? What was the story about?
I haven't really followed it. It wasn't shown on the film.
Wasn't shown. Okay, so anybody, Laura, was it shown?
Sure. I mean, usually when he eats the spinach, he gets stronger
Right.
and is able to defeat. I don't remember the name of the guy. But it's
Brutus.
Like
Called him Brutus.
Okay. Yeah, like the bully.
Right, he was the
Yeah.
bully.
Mhm.
It was Popeye, and then the girl, the
Yeah.
gal, was olive oil in the US.
Yeah.
Okay, and you would think that what I'm trying to sell here is the spinach, right? Eat this, but that's not how you sell your product. You sell the result. So what was the result? What at the end of every episode, what happened, Laura?
He defeated
He defeated the bully,
the bully. Yeah.
and then he hugged olive oil, and they lived
Yeah.
happily ever after in love.
Mhm.
That's what you sell. You sell the result, because if I want the result, then I'll eat whatever is in that can.
Yeah.
Okay, so always sell the result first. If you take this course, you will have more respect from your coworkers. Ooh, how much more sexy is that than saying, buy this book or buy these 5 videos to learn to become a better speaker? No, sell the result. All right. I know in my case, I don't like spinach. If you tried to sell me spinach, good luck. But sell me being in love with olive oil for the rest of my life, bring it on. Truckloads. Amazon. Set it on auto delivery. All right. So make sure that you're selling in the process the result. Because if I don't buy the result, I'm not interested. And then finally, when you look for ways to explain things, well, many of you, and I, by the way, I have my own startup, and I was telling Justina, I was in a hospital yesterday pitching my startup to the bioinformatic group. And you need to use analogies that help take our complex ideas and equate them with things that people already understand. For example, let's say I use a Kindle. I read a lot. And when you look at this little dog, by the way, anybody want to guess what kind of dog this is? It's a beagle. I'm here to tell you, only one kind of dog in heaven, it's a beagle. It's the cutest little dog. And when you see a picture of a little dog, does it give you a warm feeling? So the feelings that are associated with the little dog, now listen to this analogy. Using a Kindle is like spending time with a little puppy. Easy to pick up and difficult to put down. And when I choose the right analogy, I not only send across the message, the picture, but I send across the feelings too. I don't know many people who do not like small dogs. I understand some people are not big dog fans, and that's okay. But even if you're not a dog fan, there's something special about seeing a puppy dog. And we're surrounded by objects in our life that give us certain feelings. There are status products, Apple products, Tesla. Those convey feelings before they convey technical performance. I'm a big Apple fan and couldn't tell you what the chip speed, size, color, and to be very honest, don't really care. Because when I buy an Apple product, I don't buy chip size and speed and color. I buy the feeling of being important in their ecosystem. And so as you look to put your pitch together, as you prepare to dress up your child for their first day of school, and every time you pitch, it's taking your words and dressing them up for the first day of school for that audience. Spend a little time and think through the topics that we talked about. Using a pause to draw in their attention. Hitting with something powerful to grab their attention. Sharing a story with them that makes it easy to remember the one message. And then using tools like an analogy to help deliver feelings. If you put a little extra time in and look for ways to incorporate some in the beginning, some hopefully later on, all of these tools, you will come away like Popeye does with the prize that he wanted. And for you and I, when we pitch, the prize we're looking for is an investment and a validation that we're on the right path. The way you can get that validation is by choreographing your pitch to make it possible for the audience to follow you in this dance. So in the end, when you say, and that's why I can stand here and say that our solution is the best, and follow it with a pause, that you will close with a thunderous applause yourself. Justina?
Yes.
It is 11:30.
Yeah, so I'm still shook by the presentation. What you guys think? Did we have a good session with William? I'd say hell yes. I think it was absolutely fantastic. It's my applauses go to you, and
Thank you.
absolutely wonderful. If anyone has a few questions, let me give a very brief information before. So be sure that you have your session scheduled with William, and please come to your session prepared to tell your story. And me and Rita can't wait to hear your stories in the final event as well. So now, if anyone has any questions before we all go back to our everyday life, go ahead. Rita, do you want to say something? Rita is the coordinator of the whole project, William.
Wow.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much, William. I loved your presentation and your speech. I learned a lot. I'm still in the silence part, you know, because everyone tries so hard to fill the void of silence straight from the top. that I'm thinking how I will be able to implement that, but I will definitely give it a try. And I already told Justina, not only no, but hell no is my new mantra from today on. So thank you so much for that. I have to confess that you touch a lot of issues that really resonate with me, because I'm a data geek. So I usually flood other people with data as well. And I know that's terrible, because sometimes people even feel, you know, a little bit ignorant, and that's not a good place to be. So I really, really love that. I'm taking a lot from it. Thank you so much.
Great. And I think you'll appreciate that the examples are simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
And-
but people relate to simple, and they can understand. I mean, because if you don't understand what the other person is saying, then yeah, there is no relation and no connection whatsoever. So
And
that's
if I have money, if I'm an investor, I will be embarrassed to
yeah,
admit
exactly.
that I don't understand, because I'll feel like the problem is with me.
Yeah,
And I need to flip it and make sure that they do understand, so you avoid that. Wouldn't that be horrible, that they would have invested, but they didn't understand?
yeah, definitely. And the technical people and for all the companies that are in the call, sometimes want to pass the message of how cool the solution is, or how difficult was it to implement, or how innovative it is. And that you're right, and that sometimes it's not the key message, or it's not done in a way that people can relate and understand what it is, because the investor may not know anything about artificial intelligence or big data or whatever the topic is.
That's right.
So,
and even the artificial intelligence, I'm only interested in as much as I need the result.
exactly.
What happens if I use this artificial intelligence?
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah. So guys from companies, what you need is a second date, or what you want is a second date with the investor. Yeah.
Right. And then as you get deeper into a relationship, you can start to share more intimate details. You would never want to do that in the beginning, because it gets in the way of creating the impression. I need to impress you, so you will want to spend more time with me. And then if I can get that, then we can start to share more information.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, there you go, the three little pigs.
Hi, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. So my question was, I'm in a startup and I'm not the founder, so it's like the story is not totally mine. So when I have to present the project, I'm more technical, but I come from the technical field, but I'm getting into the startup and presenting and pitching. So, but the base of the story is not mine, so it's not my emotions, and I feel like I can never express the emotion like the founder of this company. So how would you? Do you have any advice to?
So it doesn't have to be your story. So maybe it was the founder's, I'm using the example I used earlier. So maybe it was the founder's uncle who died. And when the founder shared his story with you, you felt in your heart, I want to help him get to that goal, so maybe I can help my uncle too. So if you can translate why you're doing that, because if you're a technical guy, you have a choice of 500 companies to work for, right? I mean, you literally today can work for Twitter, you can work for Facebook, and you don't even have to live in California. So why are you doing what you're doing? And that you need to be able to answer. And that's where the passion starts to come out. And often, people say, well, follow your passion. Well, my answer to that is develop your passion. I don't, when I was young, I didn't know what my passion was. I looked around, I saw people who were passionate, but when will I find mine? And only after trying things and failure. You try things and then you fail, and then that's when you start to look for. But figure out how that idea impacts you personally. And then put your emphasis on that reason why you're a member of this team.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Anyone else has anything to mention? Last words, last question? Okay, it seems no, so we will not keep you busy here any longer. Thank you. I don't know, I should not say this anymore, right? So anyways, thank you everyone. It's our pleasure as Tivita to lead you through this, and this is the most perfect closing we could have hoped for the business mentoring program, really.
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you, William, so much.
Thank you.
And let's stay in touch.
Good luck. I'll see
Yeah.
many of you, all of you next week.
Yeah,
In fact, I'll see more of you next week because a lot of people have their camera turned off. Next
exactly.
week,
Exactly. Don't allow that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Awesome.
Have a
Goodbye.
wonderful
Have a
day.
nice day.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.